Welcome back to the Reviewers Roundtable, the series in which we talk to the industry's leading voices about the biggest games of the day. This week, it's The Last of Us Part 1.
You mumble in your sleep. I hate bad dreams.
Yeah, me too.
This week, I'm joined by Hamish Black of Writing on Games. Thanks for coming on, Hamish.
Thanks very much for having me, Jordan.
Now, I think this is one of the most interesting games to review in quite some time, purely based on the fact that it's a remake, it's the second re-release of one of the best games of all time. So how did you go about approaching that when it came time to actually review the game?
Well, so I think I should state up front that so I got codes a couple of weeks ago, but for a number of reasons I wasn't able to actually get into the game until today, basically. So I have a lot of thoughts on it already. I haven't played the full thing, so I'm coming to you with questions as much as I'm here to talk about it. But so I got up to around about the Henry and Sam bit, like just after that. So I've got a fair few opinions on it. Like mainly good. I think it's the like as we've been kind of talking about like before this as well. Like The Last of Us is one of the best games ever made, in my opinion. I revisited it a couple of years ago, and I still thought this is fucking incredible. And so it like kind of like I have a great fondness for that game, and when I saw the trailer for the remake, I was thinking, I don't know, I really like the way that first game looked, and I'm not sure about this new art style, the one that they used for part 2, but you know, I think it's now maybe the best looking game ever made as well. Like it really is. It is the definitive way to play The Last of Us Part 1.
Yes. It's an interesting one because going into it, I love The Last of Us. I think both games are absolute masterpieces. I think that it elevated that style of action game. And in some ways, The Last of Us is like the smoking gun for the way Sony has gone in the past 10 years. So it's easy to see that as a kind of divergence point for if The Last of Us hadn't been this kind of phenomenon, how would their PS4 generation have gone? But I was skeptical because of the price, the lack of multiplayer, the kind of strange, almost secretiveness about the game before it was publicly revealed in terms, not in terms of like the Jeff Keighley reveal, but when they were talking about the idea of the gameplay being rebuilt from the ground up, that evokes they're going to introduce The Last of Us 2's combat model and movement systems, which isn't the case. But the thing that sold it for me was 15 minutes into the game, there is the Sarah scene. And this scene was incredibly sad on PS4, incredibly sad on PS3. But on PS5, it is borderline unwatchably distressing. Like, it is not just... It's one of the first moments where I've felt like I am not watching this thing happen to a video game character. This is like Live Leak or something like that. This is just like so horrifically realistic. And I was like, okay, that's the penny dropped now. I am getting new information from these characters via the performances that couldn't have technologically been done on the PS3 and PS4. They were always there in the original capture that Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson did, but for a game that is so much about the wee looks and the gestures just with faces, the PS5 version makes that better. And to me, making the best thing about The Last of Us better makes it kind of an essential thing to experience.
Well, it's nuts because it's not just like, you know, I always associate, because you're right, like so much about like the beauty of that first game storytelling is in the fact that it's all in the animations and stuff. But like it's the things like, oh, Joel just had a slight gaze at the watch or something like that, and that kind of, you know, nothing said about it, but it's just, it evokes all these things of, oh, he's still thinking about that moment and all this other stuff, and you kind of associate that with like the kind of dire sadness, like it conveys an anguish to the characters that you know, you might not get otherwise, but the increased fidelity of animations here takes it a step further, and it's not just like sadness. It's like, it's the little bits of joy that, like, when you know, Ellie tells a shite joke and you just see a slight smirk appear on Joel's face for just a second, like it just cracks through. Or there's like, you know, when Tess gets like a bit annoyed and she kind of like squints her eyes and just that way, you know, where I don't remember it being like that clear on the original version or even like the remaster. It's this specific style where like it all the emotion comes from those facial expressions now, and obviously, you know, the great like voice acting and stuff as well. But it's like it like you say, it takes that part, the definitive aspect to me, like the thing that set that game's storytelling apart from a lot of its ilk around the time, and like amplifies it to the extent that, like, I feel like, I mean, it's kind of, you know, I guess it's kind of cliche, you know, to say like, oh, it looks like borderline photorealistic, but like you say, like I can't remember looking at a game and thinking like, I feel like I'm looking at real people.
Yeah.
Before, like, it's, and that, like you say, comes with its own like weird distressing things where, because I remember you saying about the Sarah scene and going into it thinking like, God, this is going to be horrible, and it was fucking, like, I'm no like prude or anything like that, but like, yeah. I was feeling like I feel uncomfortable watching this, but it made it so that every single kill that I made was so much more uncomfortable. Like when you stealth kill someone and it zooms in on their face, like they are desperately gasping for breath until that moment where they just give up, and it's fucking harrowing.
Yeah, it completely changed my relationship with the combat, because at that point I'm like, totally. I just want to sneak through now. Like, I don't want to have to continually watch this animation of seeing like the life drain from this person's face, and it is so like, it's such a testament to the quality of the animation and the quality of the visuals. And as you say about this looks like real people, the one that really got me was Tess, because her character model looks really different in this game compared to the original, and this is one that they've shown. The character of Tess in the original game, she looks like she could be in like her mid-20s or something like that. She's got like a fairly generic of that era video game female face, whereas in this game she seems like so much more rounded of a character. Like the kind of world weariness is there, it matches Joel, like it all feels like it fits, whereas Joel and Ellie always looked great, but it felt like some of the surrounding characters obviously didn't have as much love paid to them because they're only bit parts. But every character, even just the random characters that you pass in the kind of shanty town in the opening hour of the game, they just all look spectacular. And it's a real you can tell this game was remade by a team of people at Naughty Dog that really, really cared about the game, and that's likely why it came back in-house after it was rumoured to have been started elsewhere, because I feel like you don't get a remake of this quality without the DNA of the people that made the original game.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it was, I mean, you know, Naughty Dog games have always kind of, or since kind of, I guess, Uncharted, have been known for their kind of, like, they're almost at a level with like Rockstar in terms of their like kind of graphical excess, like technological excess, and that of course comes with its own problems in terms of the way that people are worked and everything. But you know, like the result is like an experience that really doesn't, like, I can't think of any other game like this version of this game in terms of, like, it's like the most AAA of AAA to me. It's the production values on it are insane. But I think it's interesting what like you mentioned about Tess there, because I was thinking the exact same thing about Joel. Like, between the kind of before times and where Joel is 20 years later, in the original, it didn't really feel like that much of a difference. You know, like obviously, you know, you could, there were small things, but like here it was the Joel from before is a different person, like aesthetically, to the person he is 20 years later, and he looks like, you know, his hair is like jet black. Like maybe it's the thing of the fucking HDR or whatever.
Yeah.
But like it's like the blackest of black hair. And then you skip 20 years and suddenly the wrinkles are like etched on his face and his hair is like, you know, severely graying and all that stuff. It's like they really went back and were like, right, we need to make this, you know, every part of this feel like this event has been so traumatic for this person. It's like, I mean, maybe I'm skipping ahead, but like onto the you know, it was the DualSense implementation in this game is fucking great.
Yeah.
Where it's the second you load it up and you feel Sarah like snuggling into the couch. Like there's a really kind of directional thing of like, through the controller, and it's like, all right, I'm kind of feeling the comfort of this kind of this before time in a way that I never did before. And it makes the transition to 20 years later feel all the more like visceral, and like that comfort has been ripped away. It's really like, it was quite profound in a way that I did not expect going into it.
In terms of that kind of element, you make an interesting point, that something that I thought about during most of the game is, if you think about how The Last of Us Remastered, released in the first year-ish of the PS4, was very much Naughty Dog finding its feet with this new hardware that would go on to make Uncharted 4, Lost Legacy, The Last of Us Part 2. Things like that in this make me think, oh my god, what is going to be the PS5 Naughty Dog game, which I'm pretty assured is not going to be from The Last of Us and Uncharted. Like, what is the thing that we will look back on this and go, that was them testing it out? And I think it is that DualSense integration, because the DualSense is such an interesting piece of technology that I don't think has been used anywhere near as well as it could have this generation. And for a company like Naughty Dog that wouldn't in a million years have to touch it to make their games 9s and 10s out of 10, like, I love that kind of integration. And also, and this is something they've been doing for a lot of games now, the accessibility options suite is absolutely masterful. Like, it is industry leading in terms of the amount of stuff you can do with it. And obviously we are not going to be able to speak to that from a perspective of someone that has to or wants to use that suite, but just the kind of effort put in and the tweaks that you're able to do. It's just it's a technical, when you say like a game is a technical showpiece, people jump to the ray tracing, the graphics, but it's like all the things around that are like so rock solid. What mode did you play it on? There's a fidelity and a kind of performance mode as well.
I'm performance mode all the way. I don't, you know, like the fidelity hit in any game has never been severe enough for me to prefer it, like, you know, prefer fidelity over performance. So, but like,
I usually agree with you. The only reason that I didn't in this was because it mentioned that it tries to hit 40, and because my TV has like VRR and stuff like that. I was like, what would this experience be like if I stuck it to this fidelity mode? And honestly, I found it completely fine. It's not a Twitch shooter by any means, and also there's this scene when you go into like a sewer kind of area. It's the first scene. It's the first time that Ellie tells Joel that she can't swim, and I walked half submerged into this like shallowish pool with my torch on my lapel, and as I went into the water, the torch started like ray traced lighting off the water around this metal bowl, and the frame rate took such a massive hit. It's like, okay, it's impressive that you can do this, but clearly the PS5 is like, oh my god, we're not doing water and light in this like contained space. Like, get out of here.
We must separate the elements.
But
yeah, no, I mean, the thing is, like, even on the performance mode, like, I mean, I didn't have any problems like that. Like, it looked fucking incredible still. Like, I found myself just like, I almost never like I almost never do this in games where I just like I walk past a bit and I was like, that water's there's like a water source dripping into a puddle here. I just stood and watched a fucking puddle for about fucking like 5 minutes because it was like rippling out like it's so like realistically, and I was just gawping at this fucking body of water like it was something to be like remarked on. But it was like, that's the thing. The way the light was hitting it, and like it's things like the mirrors in this game are really impressive in a way that video game mirrors can sometimes, you know, even if the reflections are really, you know, great, they can still look a bit like artificial or whatever. Like so many like tiny little details that you couldn't possibly imagine any other game going to that level of effort with unless they had the budget of a Naughty Dog or something like that. And what I found was sorry, go on.
I was just gonna say, like, for me, it instantly goes into the pantheon of like the best looking games of all time. Like, it is that, like, the PC version of Red Dead 2 on full spec is something like that. Like, the most recent Forza Horizon looks excellent, but the it is the stuff like that. It's the stuff that interrupts the game because you're just like, Jesus Christ, like, they didn't need to put this much effort into this remake, and that's why I think the narrative about it being like a cash grab or something like that rings so hollow to me, because it is not just a re-release of the PS4 version. Like, there is serious effort put into this.
I mean, yeah, like I have my opinions on the price thing that we'll come on to, but I guess like what I want to say first is that like the detail. You know, I've played through this game like multiple times on the PS3, the PS4, and all that. And like there were bits where like all that detail, it's not purely just like, oh wow, look, they did that thing. It made me notice elements of the world in a different way. Like when you're going into the kind of the museum, the history museum, and like the kind of gallery aspect of it, like I didn't realize before, or it didn't like click with me as anything to really, you know, take in, that you walk in to essentially like an like the way you go in is through an art restoration room.
Yeah.
And like you're going through it and you're seeing these paintings that were clearly like dropped in the middle of like some restoration job that have become rotted yet again. And like, you know, as kind of nature, like they've been exposed to the elements that they shouldn't be exposed to because nature's taken itself back. And it was just, I found myself going through this room that previously I was treating as essentially a corridor, but because it was in such fidelity and I was noticing like the detail in these paintings, I was like, this room, like every room I was going into was like a character with its own story, you know, and like. So it really, on a fundamental level, like, you know, you can talk about all this technical stuff, like, wow, it's amazing that they have all this lighting and all this cool stuff, but it's like the way Naughty Dog changes your very experience with the game through that stuff here, which I think is like, you know, is worthy of note. I will say though that, like, you know, kind of going back to the price thing, like, so it's 70 quid, isn't it? Or is it 60 quid?
I will double check that, because this has been The Last of Us Part 1 on Amazon is $64.99. Shop2.net is $59.85. It's in that kind of strata.
Right. Okay. I mean, like, that is like, I mean, you know, that is a lot of money, especially in the times we're currently living in. I personally, I do not blame people for thinking like, is this it? I mean, like, to be clear, you're also getting like the Left Behind DLC, which is really fucking good with it. But it's like, you know, we're talking about, like you said at the start, we're talking about a remake of a game that was already remastered, a game that came out like less than a decade ago. Like, so if someone was to say to me like, well, why would I, you know, do I need to drop? Like, I've played this game, I have access to this game. It's not been long enough that I have, you know, like trouble accessing this thing, or, or the memories have like kind of developed to a point where I'm desperate for a more modern way to play this. Like, personally, I struggle to be like, it's still really good, and is it like £65 worth? Like, that's a lot of that's a lot of money. I would say in an ideal world, yes, absolutely, it is worth it. Because I think that it is one of the best fucking games ever made, and this is the best way to play it. But it is that game, gameplay wise, it is The Last of Us, and if what we're saying about the fidelity and everything is not like, if that's not like kind of piquing your interest, you're not going to get much out of it other than that. Like, it's I don't know. I'm conflicted on it. I mean, it's also like trying to kind of come at it from the perspective of like we didn't pay for this thing. Like, we got review code sent to us. Like, and it like trying to kind of put myself in that mindset of like, would I, like, if I didn't get sent review code, I don't know that I would have paid £65 for this. I probably wouldn't have.
Yeah, that's fair. I keep thinking about it in terms of like an Ultra HD Blu-ray of a film that you already own on regular Blu-ray, that you just want the very best version of this game. And because this is one of my favorite games ever, the price barrier, while in this situation, or my personal situation, I would obviously rather pay less than that.
Yeah.
As a super fan of the game, I think it is worth it for the reasons that the game is important to me, for the reasons that I think it improves on the way that I engage with the game. However, if there's a person out there that's like, I liked it for being like a kind of stealthy zombie thing. I thought the story was alright, quite cool and stuff like that, but they were like, oh, have they remade all the encounters and stuff like that? No, it's a super authentic. It's authentic to the original experience in all the good and bad ways that means. Some of the combat encounters are pretty basic. Some of the gunplay isn't stellar, but if the narrative improvements, and I do think they are improvements because you get more information from these characters. Sure. There are new video essays to be written about this game because of the performances. I think it's a really stellar remake, and I wish this price anchor wasn't around its neck, because I think the conversation would be entirely different. And we didn't mention that it doesn't feature the multiplayer. However, I'm hesitant to even spend any time on that, because that will date this review terribly when their standalone multiplayer experience comes out in like 6 months. So it would have been people are saying this is a waste of resources. If they'd remade like the 8 maps for the multiplayer or whatever, that would have been a real waste of resources.
True.
So yeah. In conclusion, did you come away surprised? What has your experience been with The Last of Us Part 1?
I still, I mean, like I say, haven't finished it yet, but I am, this is a game I've played multiple times, and I'm super, like, as soon as we finish this, I'm getting right back into it because it's so good. Like, we haven't really talked about the gameplay because it's the same gameplay from The Last of Us, but I fucking love that gameplay. I think there's a lot of commentary out there, like from years back, saying, it's the narrative is amazing, but the gunplay doesn't really contribute to it. I think it absolutely, like, there are few games of that ilk that make me feel as panicked in gunfights as that one does, because it's just, you have enemies flanking you from all around, and you never know what's around the next. Or I mean, you never know what's coming up from behind you. Usually, it's like things can surprise you, and your best laid stealth plans will go completely off the fucking rails in a moment. It's and you just have to react to that. And yeah, sure, like the visual upgrades kind of mean that the chest high walls and the ways in which the enemies are kind of blind to, like Ellie running in front of them, like that maybe ages slightly less well in
I still prefer it if Ellie was fucking up my stealth, especially especially on harder difficulties. Like I always thought that was a good decision to make.
Totally, it was to be clear, absolutely, like that game would have been fucking unplayable if
Ellie just got like dancing in front of a clicker. Like
It's like, yeah, like when you know you take down a clicker in an army of clickers, and she's like, that was fucking scary. It's like, shut the fuck up. But you know, it's like you say, the best possible choice they could have made. It just like it's the stuff that kind of, you know, reminds you of a bygone era when everything else on a surface level at least is so cutting edge. You know, yeah, I don't know. I loved it. I'm excited to get back into it. I'm excited to I'm excited to see what these scenes look like with the increased facial like capture fidelity and stuff. Like that's the thing I'm looking forward to here. And yeah, you could get that off a fucking YouTube video if you really wanted, but it's like, you know,
you could say that about fucking every game. Like it's
true, exactly.
You want those, especially with The Last of Us, when you have all those moments where it's like the optional conversations and shit like that. Like you want to, totally. I also feel like this is a game that for 95% of people, when they hear the pitch, they'll know straight away. This kind of, I think reviews in general in this conversation will be those people in the kind of like I am keen, but what is it actually doing for me, the big Last of Us fan, etc. But we've managed to talk for half an hour about a game that came out 10 years ago. So you know what we're like. Give a plug to your channel, Hamish.
You can find me youtube.com/writingongames. I post videos there every so often. I'm going to try and get a video out before the actual launch date, which I think is the 2nd of September.
2nd, yeah.
Right.
You also have a lovely video essay about The Last of Us. Pertinent.
Yes, exactly. And we didn't even get onto...
This was planned.
We didn't get onto my views on The Last of Us 2, which are apparently contentious, but
in a nutshell, in one sentence,
structurally a mess that I think does no favors. Like the first game's ending was fucking perfect in its ambiguity, and the second game ruins that ambiguity by telling the same story twice in a way that's, I don't know. We can go on. We did go on about that game for fucking ages. We spent 2 hours talking about that game when it fucking came out.
Oh yeah, you can find a spoiler cast for The Last of Us Part 2 between me and you on YouTube somewhere. I'll put that on my Twitter. I forgot about that. Anyway, remember to check out the VGC review. Follow VGC on YouTube for all videos like this. Next Reviewers Roundtable. Me and Hamish talking about NBA 2K23. You're going to want to tune in for that.
Yeah, I wouldn't even have played that game, and I'll be here to talk for half an hour about it.
It's because I have his phone number. He can't get away from me. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me, Hamish, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks very much for having me.